I work for a full service gold and silver, physical gold and silver dealer. And today we had multiple clients who are trying to wire us funds to purchase gold and silver to escape the failing fiat system. And guess the banks are no longer allowing the wires to go through, not just to us, but to any precious metals company.
Capital controls, that's not good. And another thing that's not good is this confirmation that the United States Mint did cancel orders that were made to purchase silver from their website. A viewer sent this in. You guys can see it was canceled. Now, I did ask her. The money wasn't charged before the cancel. So if your money wasn't charged when you purchased, then odds are you just got your order canceled. And more interesting rumors from Robert Kiyosaki saying that Tesla cannot get silver. This Monday, silver will gap up from $91 an ounce to $107. Now, the thing is I'm like, okay, do we have any proof of that? Can we find anything about Tesla needing more metals? But we hate rumors. So I searched high and low to find anything about Tesla outbidding Samsung or any of that stuff, and I couldn't find anything. I found this article from 2023, though, saying that silver mines will likely be bought by automakers like Tesla, silver to be $125 per ounce. So unconfirmed. But then we have breaking news this morning where the U.S. Mint has unsuspended now the purchase of silver coins. Okay, you can now purchase from the U.S. Mint, guys. But look at how much money they have repriced their eagles to $169 an ounce. You guys, that happened as we were recording this video. So I went through the process, and sure enough, you can purchase it. Look at this. You could purchase it $175 for one eagle. But everyone just calm down a little bit, okay? Because according to the future prices, we closed at $89.90. The shenanigans that have been going on throughout the weekends for the last 3 to 4 weeks with silver is outrageous. But regardless, guys, remember, you're looking at the futures right now. And when we look at the spot price, you can see that the spot price, which is, remember, it's the physical. If you don't hold the physical, you don't have the asset. Physical silver or spot silver is at $89.45. That was the closing. Now, remember, Sunday evening, the market's going to open. And by the way, I'm going to show you the prices in China, which are outrageous. They blew open at $119 an ounce. Now, you know something crazy is going on because look at the premiums. When I go to Money Metals, we're looking at the 1 ounce silver bars, which I absolutely love. Look at the premium on the baseline. The premium is almost $9.50. The spot price is about $90. That means that the premium is over 10% on physical metal. Do not look at the future prices to determine the physical price of silver. Now, if you want to shop, and this is a big shout out to Nobody Special Finance, Jack over there, he directed me to this website, findbullionprices.com. You can come here and you can actually shop for the best prices. You guys see that one of the best prices for 1 ounce silver bar is right here, $94.12. So if you do want to start stacking, remember, you're stacking not to sell, you're stacking to hold. It's like a retirement, pension, 401k. Do not buy silver physical if you plan on selling it. Do not sell it. If you have that mindset, you don't have to get worried from all this crazy volatility. And breaking news from Shibo saying that physical silver explodes in China. You guys, this just came out 2 hours ago. We're seeing sales of silver for roughly $120 an ounce. Physical, $120 an ounce. Let me show you what they're referencing here. You guys can see that down here. These are the ads that they're referencing to come up with that information. Now, this is a good breakdown from Gold Silver HQ saying the paper slams are getting weaker. Every dip is getting bought up physically by big money. The banksters are losing the war. So you see these downdrafts right here. Look at that. 15% gap filled, 10% gap filled big time, 7% gap filled. If you're trading, especially after hours on futures, you're probably making a killing right now because that volatility, they're getting rich off of that volatility. If they're playing their cards right and they're not playing their cards right, I'm about to show you guys that TD Securities absolutely got cooked shorting silver. Now, according to Peter Schiff, and this came out yesterday, he's saying big moves are coming in precious metals and Bitcoin. Johnny Bravo, appreciate that terminology. We call it Bitcoin now. Investors need to prepare for gold and silver. That means buying more physical metal and loading up on still incredibly undervalued mining stocks. I don't know about that. But for Bitcoin holders, that means selling now before the next market crash. Interesting. Mitch, we got potential capital controls around the corner, potentially already happening with some banks. We have cancellations. We had the U.S. Mint go up from 95 to 169, 173, roughly an 80% increase. Snap of the fingers, they suspended, jack it up 80%. Mitch, can you explain to the viewers maybe a little bit about the capital control if you'd like, but also I really need you to knock this out, Mitch. And I need you to explain to mom and pop why it's so important to purchase and hold the physical metal. And just real quick for the viewers, I also need you guys to stay to the end of this video because we're going to go over a report that Mitch made that is going to explain everything that's happening in the world. And I'm going to tell you guys, this is the best report that Mitch has ever made because he finally brought a tear to my eye. I was like, finally, someone can articulate what's really going on in this world, and we don't have to sit back and we don't have to get lied to. But Mitch, why must we purchase and hold physical metal?
The job of an investor, which most mom and pops are in one way or the other, is not to listen to rumors and is to understand what's going on. In other words, be a quant. The job of a quant is to quantify what it is, the position that you wish to take, and then back that wish with facts. So what we have at the moment are quite a few rumors. However, we do have a fact. It is a fact on the US Mint that they are advertising at 173 an ounce effective immediately, and you can do the purchase. Now, is it accurate is something to be determined, and we're about to find out when the market opens tomorrow night at 5 o'clock, because if that's true, we should see a massive jump in silver at the open of the market. But it doesn't mean that the US Mint is true and at the moment, right? Because this is Saturday. So we have to figure out exactly what's going on and take everything at the moment with a grain of salt. It is true that the companies such as Tesla need the silver. These things are all quantifiable. However, let's add some additional quantifying to that. If you go and look at the 20 delta options, puts and calls, and you go out 45 days from today, the volatility is up. The put call ratio means that the calls, there's more calls than there is puts. That means that the skew in the market is to the upside. So as we said, and we pointed out on one of the charts, 1, 2, or 3 standard deviations within the current pricing range could put price of silver up or down $22 either direction and be in a 2 standard deviation range and be within the expected move probability. No problem. The point of the matter is, and to Travis's point, long-term hold, ignore the noise. You're in for the long haul. The high probability is that these metals are going to run. Just a question of when, not if, because there are multiple problems that we're seeing in the marketplace. And what this young lady just referred to a few minutes ago, that could be a capital control. And that is what has to be very closely watched.
Mitch, let's go into the problems that are happening. Let's quantify and decide and discuss the silver squeeze. And then let's end that segment talking about what your opinion is on what is the biggest factor on the volatility in silver prices. But let's start here. Now, this article came out yesterday. Silver is now a national security issue and prices could explode. Don't forget, they categorize silver now as a critical mineral. That just happened last year, you guys. Now, this also came out. APMEX imposes a $10,000 minimum to curb demand due to record gold silver highs. Now, I went there to verify that, and here's the letter from their CEO. This doesn't discuss the $10,000, but what it does discuss is they're adding 4 days on top of their normal turn time, and they also hired 25% more people. Look at this. Finally, on sales/customer service, we have increased headcount by 25%. That is insane, insane demand. Now, when we talk about some of the reasons for the silver squeeze, here's some key forces that are driving record prices. On the upper left, it says direct pressures on the physical market. For example, Shanghai silver prices nears $100, but this is old, guys. This is like a couple hours old. It's now $119 because of the parabolic nature. The US Mint warns of halting silver eagles. That's also just changed. Things are changing so quickly. Not only are they no longer halted, they increased it by over 80% overnight. Okay. Also, the CME Group launches smaller 100-ounce paper contracts. They're allowing more liquidity in the paper market. Up on the upper right here, looming macroeconomic storm. Japan's soaring bond yields create global risk. Also right here, US Fed may respond with massive money printing QE, leading probably to a crisis of confidence. And then on the bottom left, dollar devaluation could propel silver to triple digits. But one thing that didn't point out is the contract. So I wanted to do a quick breakdown. I'll have this released on my Facebook, on my X. We're just looking at the contracts for COMEX, guys. Only COMEX. There are many, but again, we're only looking at COMEX. We have to figure out what is the delta here? What is the difference between long and short? Because people and banks are shorting. I'm going to show you TD. But on the upper left here, here's the COMEX silver combined total reportable short positions. And you guys see here on the upper left that there's approximately 218,000 contracts for short. Remember, it's about 5,000 ounces per contract. Now, on the bottom chart you see right here, here are the longs, okay? So for the longs, that's sitting at 153,240. When we take the shorts minus the longs, the delta or the difference is 65,808 total contracts. So on the bottom here, we take that net amount of short contracts, which is at 65,000, times 5,000 ounces per contract equals 329 million ounces of silver. 329 million, guys. They're shorting 329 million ounces. When we multiply that by the $88, is actually more. I'm just rounding down for the benefit of the doubt here. That's $28.9 billion. $28.9 billion. But also I want to go back to how much silver this actually is. When we turn ounces into tons, okay, so per 1 ton, that's 32,000 ounces. That means that COMEX, only COMEX, is shorting 10.2 thousand tons. 10.2 thousand tons of silver. When we look at just the US production, US produces 1,100 tons per year. That means COMEX is shorting 9.3 years of silver that they don't have, and that's only going parabolic. I wonder if the banks that are doing that are going to go belly up. And that's not all. Now, when we look at the SLV, the iShares of Silver Trust Interest, that's at about 3.64 billion, but I also wanted to show you the leverage. They're only putting down 9.9% of collateral, meaning they could leverage up 1 to 10. So $1 equals $10. They're still playing this game, is the point I'm trying to make. They're still trying to short the market. Now, here's the information, guys, on TD Securities. So they shorted silver when silver was at $78, saying that it was going to go down to $40. They just exited this position at $92.50 an ounce. They lost so much money, you guys. They thought silver was going to go down to $40. The opposite happened. It skyrocketed up. TD Securities got smoked. This is an interesting post from Steph Mays 22 on X. She's been sharing a lot of our content, so big shout out to her. Join her, check out what she's going through, check out what she's posting, guys. She's really covering the property tax. Big shout out, big thank you, Stephanie, if you're listening. But she made an interesting point. Bear Stearns, okay, who collapsed during the global financial crisis. I know that because I used to use Bear Stearns. They're a portfolio lender that used to lend heavy on what's called negatively amortized mortgages. So I don't know if I believe this, but this is interesting. Bear Stearns allegedly faced a $2.5 billion margin call on their silver short position because the price surged over $21 an ounce. Now that hit me by surprise because, again, the neg am, right? The mortgage-backed security collapse. So I'm not 100% sure, but I find it very interesting, the comment that she made. Now, Mitch, we went over many of the factors that are contributing to this type of parabolic price increase. But what do you believe is the biggest factor? What is the biggest factor right now that's driving silver prices?
It's a combination of things. So I think that word quantify is appropriate here. Here's what you heard. You heard national security and you heard industrial demand. Here's what you didn't hear. Price suppression, which has been on the go for years. Price discovery, which is the volatility of the market right now that you're seeing in the last several days play up and down $4 to $7 a day in silver. More paper derivatives than the existing physical. That is tens of billions of dollars short of metal, meaning the contracts can't be covered. I've stated in the past, this is paper chasing paper. What banks can take the hit, the financial hit that Travis just showed? Will the Fed need to bail those banks out? Has the Fed already bailed some of those banks out? and the technicals. We've talked about the technicals on these charts in the past, and what do those technicals show? The ability to analyze every single one of those line items is the ability to quantify, to give guidance as to where things could move. The point of the matter is, we're going to get into an article very shortly that's going to explain exactly who is responsible for what's going on here.
All right, guys. So we're going to get into this next segment, which is extremely, extremely powerful. But before we go into Mitch's article, which again, he finally moved me, had a little bit of a tear in my eye. Only Melody Wright can do that. And now Mitch Vexler as well. Let's talk a little bit more about this crisis of confidence. BlackRock is eating the world. Total assets under management hit a record $14 trillion. I wonder how much the 401k and the pension holders are making during this time. Maybe 5%, maybe 6%. They're not making the return on silver, like you guys can see here, over 5 days, 12.6% up. Over just 1 month, silver's up 33%. Over 3 months, it's up 77.56%. So I asked the people that have 401ks and retirements why. Also, some breaking news. The Fed will inject $55.3 billion of our money that we didn't give them permission to do over the next 3 weeks, starting next Tuesday. They're officially launching one of the biggest QE programs in the U.S. history. That's not good. Also, what's not good is this right here, a reminder that about 1/4 of U.S. debt matures in the next 12 months. The last time we saw similar refinancing pressure, policy rates were at 0%. Which all leads us to this absolutely incredible article. Now, Mitch has given me permission to read pages 3 and 4, which are, again, page 3 and 4 in this is my absolute favorite writing he has ever made, and he's made a lot. So Mitch is going to read up to that point. I'll take over page 3 and 4. But Mitch, can you go over this document? I have it on the screen for the viewers. And before you do, I just want to say thank you for articulating what's really happening in the U.S. because, my friend, it gets really lonely out there. So thank you for doing this. This is amazing. I want you guys to read this 3 times. This whole article 3 times. And a disclosure, if the word socialism hurts your feelings, I've created another word, theftism. Okay, so just change socialism with theftism. All right, Mitch, whenever you're ready, sir.
Socialism is a noun. The synonym for socialism is theft. Last rat standing. Socialism is defined as a political system advocating that the means of production and distribution are owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Words that you may have heard being representative of socialism are collectivism, communalism, communism, leftism, progressivism, Marxism, Bolshevism, Leninism, Trotskyism, welfarism, Maoism, neo-Marxism, social democracy, consumer socialism, utopian socialism, classless society, collective ownership, public ownership, state ownership, Stalinism, Sovietism, Marxism, Leninism, Eurocommunism, totalitarianism, radical socialism, state ownership, rule of the proletariat, and state socialism. All of these synonyms can be replaced with one word: theft. Theft of your money, or theft of any person or victim who earns money and pays taxes, where those taxes go into pet projects which the victims did not vote for, and or to cover the compound cumulative interest on the nonstop production of fraud created by the fraudsters, aka socialists. It is no coincidence that the 2 largest purveyors of fraud in the United States are the Federal Reserve and the school districts, which own the central appraisal districts, both of which utilize the mantra of printing money. One, the Federal Reserve, via its right hand, the U.S. Treasury, prints money not backed by assets at will. The other being the school districts, which print money by committing accounting fraud and bond fraud, demanding continuous bond raises, delivering predetermined budgets for their own central appraisal district to contrive additional property valuation and fraud, and thus overtaxation for you, the victim, to pay for in perpetuity. And as a result, the median household income, your median household income, shrinks at an alarming rate. In other words, the Fed, school districts, and central appraisal districts are socialist organizations that execute the plan of socialism while simultaneously paying themselves, which is again transferring your money via fraud into their pockets. This article is now part of a series of recent important articles, all of which should be read by every citizen in the United States and Canada and any country across the world to help people understand that socialism is the scourge of any society. Those most recent documents are all within the last 2 weeks. Chain the Doors of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a failure, thesis and fact, part 1 and 2. I don't know what they think, but I do know is this. We live in the world of fraud and fraudsters, how to protect yourself. And the daily affordability is unobtainable and what you can do about it. The reason why these articles are so important is that our goal is to expose the fraud that touches the lives of every property owner and also directly or indirectly every single citizen. It has become clear in recent years that many people paid for an education that did not create a return on their investment. It is also clear that many so-called bastions of education have now been exposed as incubators for socialists. Isn't it interesting and not at all coincidental that on average across the United States, 83% of all property taxes collected, including municipal tax collections, go towards education in 2 components, being operations and maintenance, that's the O&M, and interest and sinking fund, that's the INS, both of which are now proven to be counterproductive to the education of students. We have shown conclusively that the theft of your money by the school districts occurs. See the school district accounting fraud, and that's a presentation that was actually made to President Trump and Elon Musk on video as well as in writing, and the article for the kids. The psychology of a socialist is detailed in Chain the Doors of the Federal Reserve, and I've linked that above. In that article, and in this article, an extension of Chain the Doors and the writing of Thomas Paine, presented in Thomas Paine Quotes on Taxes and the Necessity of Taxation. In this article, I would like to dig deeper to show why socialism is the antithesis of capitalism and the US Constitution, and why socialism should be codified as illegal. Without exception and without question, stealing private property is immoral and illegal. Socialists via taxation, as you are seeing play out live in Minnesota, want to make this acceptable. To crystallize the thought, money is property. Physical assets are property. Businesses are property. Your mortgage is property from which over time, the amortization on your mortgage, being the principal reduction, is property. Bank accounts are property. In all 5 instances, which in totality are your life, the socialists want to steal your money. Therefore, as socialists promote socialism, A, and socialism is theft, B, then socialists are thieves, C. If A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. Not just theft of your property, but theft of constitutional rights and theft of the fabric of civilized society, being morals and respect for individual rights.
All right, guys, so it's my turn. Again, thank you, Mitch. This is page 3 and 4. I'm about to read you guys my favorite writings of Mitch. And by the way, I just wanted to let you guys know, he's intentionally not capitalizing socialism, as he said. And I'm going to try to do the best I can to change the word socialism with theftilism. All right, so I'm going to do the best I can there. But these next 2 pages, it moved me. It really moved me, guys. So I'm going to start with page 3, as you guys can see here. Could it be that the warped moral view of theftalist is a direct result of the education system that does not teach how to survive and prosper in the real world, thus making brainwashing people to be dependent on the handouts from the government rather than participating in the only system that has worked for the last 5,000 years, which is capitalism? Are the students to blame, or are the teachers and politicians, the politicians who are preaching and screeching that create the fraud from which to take your tax dollars to support the fraud they created? That doesn't sound fair. Our goal is to explain to those who have been misled to at least consider the truth of socialism, which is that it leads to death and destruction, and no rational person would want that upon themselves or their families and their communities. The legal view of a socialist, which is not legal under constitutional law, is that preventing others from stealing your private property is somehow tyrannical. This is beyond rational thought and can only be the ramification of intentionally brainwashing from which those in positions of power, regardless of political party affiliation, including the press, receive the benefit of profit and or perceived power. My power comes from above. Organized retail theft rampant in the most socialist U.S. cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, Minnesota is a ramification of socialist policies. You guys, I have to say socialist. I am too immersed in this document. I'm sorry about that. The socialists make the argument that they are just the poor working class, but they're millionaires, needing to prevent starvation and homelessness, so stealing $5,000 Louis Vuitton bags is perfectly acceptable. That is beyond rational thought. The need for socialists to support theft and immigration for votes, costing the taxpayers roughly $1 trillion per year, which is divided into $65,000 per illegal immigrant, also conveys that socialists are not capable of building an economy or products and services from scratch. This is important. This last quote is my favorite one. Socialism has never in the history of the planet worked because it self-terminates when it runs out of other people's money to steal. That is the banger line right there. The socialist mantra is this: the capitalist is stealing from the worker under wage labor slavery, and the worker is not receiving the full value of their labor by pocketing what worker created. So I guess it's just best to steal, right? Wrong. Now, proof of the idiocy of the socialist cult mantra. In truth, the worker and the capitalist employer voluntarily agree beforehand to the wages and the work to be done, so it is not stealing. B, the worker would not be able to produce any goods or services of value if they are not working for the employer. C, the worker can quit and engage in self-employment at any time. D, setting up a business, making agreements with suppliers, arranging financing, and setting up a pipeline for customers, which is often what capitalists do, is labor and is much harder than a worker being involved in just one component of the company. So they got a lot of different things, right? E, the worker can quit and join or start a co-op if they believe that this type of work arrangement works better. Now, this last part. Society can't fix what it can't define. And that is the main emphasis of this article. This is everyone, guys. It doesn't matter your political party. It doesn't matter your race or religion. This is affecting us all. If we're citizens of the US, it's all of us, guys. In the furtherance of defining the issue, what was in the 1980s and 1990s a Democratic Party no longer exists. This is not to say there are not reasonable Democrats who would like to participate in a legitimate political party to voice their opinions. This is to say, however, that reasonable Democrats have been cast aside and overshadowed by pure socialism, and that means pure theft. The truth is laid out bare in the finances of the DNC, which are now negative. Gustave Le Bon, in his work, The Psychology of Socialism, argues that socialism and radicalism functions similarly to religious movements. He suggests that political controversies often stem from contrived emotional responses rather than rational deliberation. This perspective highlights the role of psychology in shaping political ideologies and movements. Socialism as a cult involves extreme devotion to a leader or ideology, often characterized by manipulation and control over members' thoughts and behaviors. This can lead to a lack of critical thinking and a strong group identity, which may be reinforced through propaganda and social pressure. Socialism cults often revolve around a charismatic leader who promotes a vision of the collective society. These groups may exhibit extreme devotion to their ideology and, unfortunately, their leader, which can lead to a strong sense of community among members. Key characteristics include beliefs that diverge significantly from mainstream society, use of manipulation techniques to maintain loyalty and control over members, focuses on a communal ownership and the idea of working towards a common goal. This is when I started having a tear in my eye. The psychology behind socialism cults can involve several factors, including members often find a sense of identity and purpose within the group, but we're not looking above, which can be appealing, especially in terms of social uncertainty. A clear pattern of cognitive dissonance emerges as its members may experience discomfort when their beliefs are challenged, leading them to reinforce their commitment, not logic, to the group via emotional outbursts or, sadly, unfortunately, and this is scary, violence. It is a combination of emotional outburst, violence, and not willing to participate in a conversation, guys. A conversation which attempts to strip the rest of society from the First Amendment rights of free speech through intimidation. It goes one step deeper in that there are socialists working among government entities that undermine the purpose of the entities and knowingly, with intent, break the law to support a socialist cult. This is a prime example of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Charismatic leaders play a crucial role in socialism cults. Just because they're charismatic and they're great at talking does not mean they're not sinister. They often create an idolized image where the leaders are portrayed as heroic figures, which can enhance loyalty. Craig, propaganda is used to manipulate and maintain a positive image of the leader and the ideology. The leaders may invoke nationalistic sentiments to strengthen group coercion while simultaneously failing to provide one stick of evidence against the simple fact that socialism dies when it runs out of other people's money to steal, including the theft of money from its own members. All right, guys, Mitch is going to take us to the finish line. I want you guys to stick this out. This is so important to understand and why we have to purchase physical and hold it and hold it. Everything we're reading right now, this is the reason behind the physical. We cannot trust our governments, and they prove it time and time again, and they are manipulating and hurting our people. They are brainwashing them and creating violent creatures. Mitch, when you're ready, sir.
See if you can figure out where this brilliant quote came from. They'd come on a fishing boat and gorge themselves on coconut. So how do you get ruts off an island? My grandmother showed me. We buried an oil drum and hinged the lid. Then we wired coconut to the lid as bait. The rats would come for the coconut and they would fall into the drum. And after a month, you've trapped all the rats. Well, what did you do then? Did you throw the drum into the ocean? Did you burn it? No, you just leave it and they begin to get hungry. Then one by one, they start eating each other until there are only 2 rats left, the 2 survivors. And then what? Did you kill them? No. You take them and release them into the trees. Only now, they don't eat coconut anymore. Now they eat rat. You have changed their nature. This is the backstory to the last rat standing, and exactly what happens to socialism and socialists. We are proving the truth with irrefutable evidence on just a few interlinked issues with property tax at the nucleus, so that society, being rational thinking people, can deal with the fraud of the socialists and insist that the Republic of the United States stand strong under its Constitution. What we have discovered is very much applicable in Canada and any other country that claims to use uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, in which USPAP has been rendered meaningless by intent to defraud, which proves the policy is that of socialism executed by socialists. The Constitution of the United States of America, or socialism. Over 100 million people have died due to socialist, Marxist, or communist regimes, not from war, but from their own governments and brutal policies. Socialism is cloaked in promises of equality, justice, and free service, including free education, healthcare, housing, and jobs. Its appeal is emotional, targeting the hopes of the marginalized and the frustrations of the working class. Beneath the promises lies the historical reality of oppression, economic collapse, and human suffering. With Cuba and many others listed herein, socialism has consistently failed, not just economically, but leaving behind a legacy of destroyed economies, starved populations, and crushed freedoms. The false promise of equality. Socialism is all promise and no deliver because it is a con. It centralizes power into the hands of a few, creating the very hierarchy and inequality it claims to abolish. The result is not a classless society, but a society where the government becomes the new elite, often ruled by a dictator, while the people suffer under authoritarian control and economic misery. Socialism demands a revolution to tear everything down in order to create its new communist infrastructure. And you can see this playing out live in Minnesota, Germany, the European Union, the UK, and played out in our hemisphere in Cuba. You can see a portion of my story on Cuba, and it is linked in one of the articles above. After Castro took over in 1959, he nationalized 70% of the farmland. The result? Between 1957 and 1958, the period before Castro, and 1963 to 1964, by which time the nationalization had been done, the production of beef, pork, poultry, eggs, meat, corn, rice, root vegetables, and yucca, and potatoes all fell by double digit. And typically a high double-digit percentage. Output of their biggest crop, sugar, fell by 35%. Why didn't the Cubans starve? Because the Russians, Soviet Union, bailed them out. The CEA report notes that Puerto Rico and Cuba had relatively equal national incomes in 1950, but by 2000, Cuba's national income relative to Puerto Rico's had fallen by almost 2/3. I saw the results of this. I was in these stores in Cuba where the locals go, and even the most basic toiletries were not available. The Soviet Union, death by utopia. The USSR was the first major experiment in socialism after the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution. Under Stalin, the state controlled all means of production, abolished private property, and forced collectivization of farms. The result was beyond catastrophic. The Holodomor in 1932 to 1933, a man-made famine in Ukraine caused by forced collectivism. An estimated 3.9 million people starved to death. Stalin's purges, gulags, and mass arrests led to millions of deaths and imprisonment, often without trial. Shortages became the norm. Citizens stood in long lines for bread and toiletries, just like Cuba. By the time it collapsed in 1991, the Soviet socialist system had claimed over 20 million lives through executions, famines, and forced labor. Mao's China. Under Chairman Mao, the Chinese Communist Party unleashed two of the deadliest campaigns in human history. The Great Leap Forward in 1958 through 1962, Mao's forced collectivization and industrialization effort caused the deadliest famine in world history, killing an estimated 30 to 45 million people. The Cultural Revolution in 1966 through 1976, a purge of perceived capitalist elements. All of this was carried out in the name of socialist ideology. The people were promised prosperity. What they received was death and devastation. Venezuela, the collapse in real time. Venezuela, once one of Latin America's richest countries, embraced socialism under Hugo Chavez and continued under Maduro, promising to redistribute oil wealth and end poverty. The regime nationalized industries, restricted private property, and eliminated market competition. The result? Inflation surpassed 1 million% in 2018, making its currency practically worthless. Food shortages became widespread. 90% of the population fell below the poverty line. Hospitals lacked basic medicine. Children died of malnutrition. Millions of Venezuelans fled the country, creating one of the largest refugee crises in the Western Hemisphere. Far from bringing justice, socialism in Venezuela robbed an entire generation of hope, just like Cuba. Cuba and North Korea, islands of oppression. Both Cuba and North Korea remain socialist examples of totalitarian control. Cuba, under Fidel Castro, jailed dissidents, eliminated press freedoms, and kept the population under tight surveillance. To this day, internet access is restricted, dissent is punished, and scarcity remains the norm. North Korea represents perhaps the most extreme example. Ruled by dictatorship, its citizens face starvation, public executions, and complete isolation. Meanwhile, the regime invests in weapons and luxury for the ruling class. Why socialism always fails. Socialism destroys the incentive to innovate, produce, and excel by removing profit and competition. It replaces market decisions with bureaucratic ones, often by force. Worse, it concentrates immense power in the hands of the state, and as we have seen, that power is almost always abused. My father taught me that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Socialism is a con, and in every case, without exception, it led to authoritarian control, economic collapse, suppression of dissent, loss of personal freedom. According to the Black Book of Communism, a publication of European scholars, the death toll from socialist regimes in the 20th century exceeded 100 million people. These are not deaths from war, but from starvation, execution, prison camps, and purges. And all were committed in peacetime by governments against their own people. To the socialists, it is okay if you disagree with your position in life or even this article. However, if you are a rational thinking person, then ask yourself if there is anything in this article that is not true. As it is true, then what does that say about you as a person wanting to put yourself, your family, and your alleged friends in harm's way of a horrific con that has ended in death? To the alleged Republicans, it is time to look at the policies you created, and if they were for socialist reasons and ended in socialist, nonstop compound cumulative interest on fraudulent bond debt, then you either move to immediately destroy those policies, all property tax, or the only thing that separates you from the socialists in Minnesota is the violence. If any new policy is a socialist policy that is for the benefit of the government and not for the citizens, then that attempted policy should never see the light of day or be approved. We are now at the Supreme Court in Texas with a published statement that either the black letter of the law exists or it doesn't. See the importance of the Vexler case to Texas. The reason for this case is the refusal of the courts to deal with the legal dead zone they created. And that is exactly what the Supreme Courts of the United States and the Supreme Court of Texas exists for. Either the law exists or it doesn't. We are about to find out. In conclusion, socialism delivers control, coercion, and collapse. Socialism promises free, but the truth is, the world can't afford free. Socialism must be codified into law as illegal. It is a cult. Call it what it is, and let's deal with it. Society, regardless of political affiliation, if any, should realize that a social policy is not socialism. Social policy could and should be a policy to eliminate hunger. It could and must be a policy and should be a policy to eliminate cancer. These social policies are set forth and defined by the government, but financially executed without government involvement. The market must do the lifting, not the government. Please forward these articles to every social media outlet you can find, every government official you can find, your friends, your family, your neighbors. Anybody that you can find needs to understand what's going on here. The more people that know, the better off we will all be. Repeal all property tax in favor of the uniform states sales tax. Your involvement as a taxpayer and a property owner is absolutely critical. Thank you.
The time to stand together is now, and hopefully that report properly explained why we must purchase and hold, the key word, the physical metal. And hopefully it also explained why, as a community, if we see someone that needs help, that's on the ground, that's asking for help, we need to stop and we need to help that person. Now, everything is going to be linked below. We're going to send a Substack out briefly with this article. So if you're already on Substack, you're about to get this article completely free. Please share it, you guys. Please comment below. Hit hype if you have it. Other than that, if you guys are out there just trying to live your life, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.